The desolation of Outpost Epsilon was matched only by its obscurity. Nestled at the outermost edge of Fraxian territory, the repair station survived on scraps of work that larger, more reputable facilities wouldn't touch. A collection of interconnected hangars and living quarters that had seen better centuries. Its metal skin was scored by micrometeorite impacts and discolored by the harsh radiation of the nearby dwarf star. 300,000 universals, Milo repeated, staring at the contract glowing on his datapad. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, leaving streaks of engine grease behind. For a 21-day restoration job. Vex, the crew's hull restoration specialist, whistled through her teeth. Nearly 2 meters tall with shoulders broad enough to carry an auxiliary thruster unit without assistance. She peered over Milo's shoulder. That's more than we've made in the last 3 months combined. Has to be a catch, said Dr. Elaine Kittredge, known simply as Doc to everyone at the outpost. The diagnostic engineer never looked up from the ancient circuit board she was repairing, her augmented eyes zooming in and out with mechanical clicks as she soldered connections invisible to the naked eye. Nobody pays that much for a simple exterior restoration. Maybe they do if it's a T-class cruiser, Milo countered, still scrolling through the contract details. These things have been out of production for over a century. Collector's item. Piper, the youngest of their crew at barely 20 standard years, bounced on the balls of her feet. A T-cruiser! I've only seen those in historical hollows. Her excitement was infectious, if misplaced. Her role as junior mechanic meant she was usually relegated to the most menial tasks, but her enthusiasm never seemed to wane. Milo sighed. The contract was straightforward enough. Full exterior restoration of a decommissioned T-class Imperial cruiser. Client confidentiality clause. Materials provided. 21 days to completion. And the payment. Enough to keep their struggling outpost operational for another year, with plenty left over to upgrade their outdated equipment. What do you think, Milo? Vex asked, folding her massive arms across her chest. We taking it? He looked around at the sad state of their workshop. Outdated tools, patched-together diagnostic equipment, the perpetual leak in the ceiling that nobody could quite locate. Then, back at the sum on the contract. We'd be fools not to. The ship arrived 3 days later, towed by an unmarked transport vessel that departed as soon as the cruiser was safely docked in their largest hangar. Milo had expected something impressive, but the reality exceeded even his imagination. The T-class cruiser was massive, filling their primary bay from end to end. At over 80 meters long, its sleek lines were barely visible beneath layers of cosmetic damage. The once gleaming hull was scorched and pitted, the external plating discolored by decades, perhaps centuries of neglect. She's beautiful, Piper whispered, staring up at the vessel in awe. She's a wreck, Doc corrected, already scanning the exterior with her diagnostic visor. But salvageable. A slender man in an immaculate gray uniform approached them from the far side of the hangar. His posture was perfect, his expression unreadable. I am Supervisor Tamar, he announced without preamble. I will be overseeing this restoration on behalf of my employer. Milo stepped forward, extending a hand that the supervisor pointedly ignored. Milo Farron, owner of this establishment. These are my colleagues. I'm not concerned with introductions. Tamar cut him off. Your expertise is what matters, not your names. The contract stipulates complete exterior restoration within 21 standard days. All necessary materials have been provided. He gestured to a row of crates being unloaded from a second shuttle. I will require daily progress reports. Vex bristled visibly, but Milo shot her a warning glance. 300,000 universals. They could tolerate a little rudeness for that kind of payment. Any special requirements we should be aware of? Milo asked. The ship's interior is strictly off-limits, Tamar replied. Any attempt to access internal systems will result in immediate contract termination. His cold eyes swept over each of them in turn. Is that understood? They nodded in unison. Excellent. You may begin immediately. With that, he turned and walked toward a small observation room overlooking the hangar. Charming fellow, Doc muttered, once he was out of earshot. Doesn't matter, Milo replied. Let's get to work. The restoration began in earnest the following day. Vex took charge of the hull repair, her powerful frame making light work of removing damaged exterior panels. Doc's expertise was invaluable in assessing the ancient systems without actually accessing them, a challenging task she approached with characteristic precision. Piper, eager to prove herself, took on the painstaking work of cleaning decades of space grime from the vessel's intricate external components. Milo, meanwhile, coordinated their efforts and handled the administrative tasks, keeping their irritable supervisor updated with carefully worded progress reports. It was on the fourth day that Piper noticed something unusual. Milo, she called, her voice echoing across the hangar. Can you take a look at this? He climbed the scaffolding to where she was working on a section of hull, near what would have been the crew quarters. She pointed to a discolored patch of metal that seemed different from the surrounding corrosion. What am I looking at? He asked. Watch. She sprayed the cleaning solution on the spot and wiped it with her cloth. The liquid turned a faint, reddish brown. That's not rust or oxidation. I think it's blood. Milo frowned. Blood? On the exterior hull? Fresh blood, she clarified. The chemical reaction indicates it's no more than a few weeks old. How does blood get on the outside of a supposedly decommissioned, century-old cruiser? Milo's unease grew. Keep this between us for now, and don't mention it in your reports. Later that same day, Doc called him over to examine a component she'd removed from one of the external sensor arrays. Look at this, she said, holding up what appeared to be a standard quantum relay. Notice anything unusual? Milo studied it for a moment. It looks new. Precisely. Doc's augmented eyes narrowed. This isn't century-old technology. This particular design of quantum relay wasn't developed until about 15 years ago. Maybe it was replaced during previous maintenance. Without updating any of the surrounding systems? Highly improbable. She set the component down carefully. And there's more. The ship's entropy coefficient is all wrong. Meaning? Meaning the molecular degradation patterns don't match a vessel that's been inactive for decades. This ship has been operational, and recently, Milo's stomach tightened. Keep this quiet for now. I need to check something. That evening, after the others had retired to their quarters, Milo accessed the contract files again, scrutinizing the details he'd initially glossed over. Buried in the technical specifications was a reference to the ship's registry number. He cross-referenced it with the limited historical database they maintained at the outpost. Nothing matched. On a hunch, he ran the number through a different algorithm, treating it as an encrypted code rather than a straightforward registry. The result made his blood run cold. The number, when decrypted, corresponded to a completely different classification of vessel, one that officially didn't exist in any public record. Milo was still pondering this discovery the next morning when Vex pulled him aside. I found something strange, she whispered, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. Come with me. She led him to a section of the hull she'd been restoring, pointing to what appeared to be an innocuous pattern of scratches. Look closely, she instructed. It's not random damage. Milo squinted, then saw it. The marks formed a crude diagram, an engineer's schematic of the ship's internal layout, including sections that shouldn't exist on a standard T-class cruiser. Someone carved this deliberately, Vex explained. And recently, the marks cut through layers of oxidation that took decades to form. A message, Milo murmured. A warning, maybe, Vex suggested. Or a map. Their strange discoveries continued to mount. On the seventh day, Piper accidentally activated what appeared to be a hidden access panel while cleaning a section of the ship's undercarriage. I barely touched it, she insisted when she called the others over. The panel just Opened. The compartment was small, barely large enough to accommodate a human hand. Inside was a cube, approximately 10 centimeters on each side, its surface intricately carved with patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. "Don't touch it," Doc warned, scanning the object with her visor. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures. It could be dangerous." "Or valuable," Vex added. Milo made a decision. "Put it back and seal the compartment. Pretend we never found it." Piper frowned. "But—" "No buts," Milo interrupted. "Something's not right about this ship, and I don't want to risk our payment by getting curious. We restore the exterior as contracted. Nothing more." They agreed, reluctantly, to continue as planned. But that night, Milo couldn't sleep. The mysteries of the ship plagued him. The fresh blood, the modern components, the hidden schematic, the strange cube. Against his better judgment, he returned to the hangar alone. The ship loomed in the darkness, illuminated only by the emergency lighting. Milo made his way to the hidden compartment, retrieving the cube with trembling hands. Its surface was cool to the touch, the carvings seeming to pulse beneath his fingers. Almost instinctively, he rotated the cube in a specific pattern, following the flow of the carvings. There was a soft click, and the cube's surface began to glow with a pale blue light. A holographic projection erupted from the cube, filling the air around him with images so vivid they seemed solid enough to touch. Milo found himself surrounded by scenes of a battle. No, a massacre. Imperial warships decimating civilian transports, planetary bombardments reducing cities to ash, and at the center of it all, a vessel that looked remarkably like the one currently sitting in his hangar. The projection shifted, showing the interior of what appeared to be the ship's command center. A man in elaborate robes stood before a view screen, watching dispassionately as a planet burned. Though Milo had only seen his image in propaganda broadcasts, the face was unmistakable. Emperor Darien. The projection abruptly collapsed, the cube growing hot in his hands. Milo nearly dropped it, managing to return it to its compartment just as the hangar doors slid open. Supervisor Tamar stood silhouetted against the light from the corridor, his thin figure casting a long shadow across the floor. "Working late, Mr. Farron?" His voice was deceptively casual. "Just checking some measurements," Milo lied, his heart pounding. "Couldn't sleep?" "Indeed." Tamar stepped further into the hangar. "Dedication is admirable, but don't exhaust yourself. We still have 2 weeks of restoration ahead." "Of course." Milo moved away from the ship, hoping his nervous demeanor wasn't too obvious. "I was just leaving." Tamar watched him go, his eyes calculating. "Pleasant dreams, Mr. Farron." Milo barely slept that night, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd seen. The ship in their hangar wasn't just any vessel. It was the Sunfire, Emperor Darien's personal warship, believed to have been destroyed in the Battle of Kestrel's Gate 3 years ago. Which meant they weren't restoring a collector's item. They were repairing the most notorious killing machine in the known galaxy. The next morning, Milo gathered his crew in their small break room, well away from the hangar and its surveillance systems. "We need to talk," he began, keeping his voice low. "About the ship." He shared his discoveries, watching their expressions shift from disbelief to horror. "The Emperor's ship," Piper whispered, her usual enthusiasm replaced by fear. "Why would it be here?" "And who is our actual client?" Vex added. "Surely not the Emperor himself." Doc, ever practical, focused on the immediate concern. "What do we do now? If we breach contract by refusing to continue, we not only lose the payment but potentially face Imperial retribution." "If we complete the restoration," Milo countered, "we're potentially enabling more atrocities." They fell into troubled silence, the weight of their situation settling over them. "There's something else," Vex finally said. "I've noticed an unusual security presence around the outpost since the ship arrived. People who aren't part of our regular staff or the supervisor's team. Spies, Piper suggested. Or protection, Doc offered. If this truly is the Emperor's vessel, he wouldn't leave it unguarded. Milo made a decision. We continue the restoration as contracted, but we stay alert, and we gather as much information as we can without raising suspicion. They nodded in agreement, though none looked particularly convinced that this course of action would end well for them. As the days passed, the exterior restoration progressed smoothly, at least on the surface. Beneath their professional demeanor, each member of the crew was constantly on edge, watching for any clue that might explain their situation. It was Doc who made the next significant discovery. While replacing an external sensor array, she detected an anomalous signal emanating from within the ship, a subspace transmission on a frequency so obscure it had almost escaped her notice. "It's encrypted," she told Milo when they met in the small storage closet that had become their de facto secure meeting location. "But I managed to capture a fragment of the decrypted stream before it terminated." "What did it say?" Milo asked. Doc's expression was grim. 2 words: Succession Protocol. The Imperial Succession Protocol was the stuff of political thrillers and conspiracy theories, a mechanism allegedly built into the foundations of the Empire that would transfer power in the event of the Emperor's death or incapacitation. Some believed it was merely a legal framework. Others insisted it was an actual technological system, hidden somewhere in the Imperial infrastructure. "Could be coincidence," Vex suggested when they discussed it later. "Those words could mean anything in the right context. Or it could mean someone is planning a coup," Milo countered. "And this ship is somehow part of it." Their speculation was cut short on the 14th day, when disaster struck. The first indication was a distant rumble that quickly grew to a deafening roar. Alarms blared throughout the hangar as flames erupted from the ship's propulsion section, a part of the vessel they hadn't even begun to restore. "Fire in the main engine compartment!" Vex shouted over the klaxons. "The coolant systems must have ruptured." "That's impossible," Doc countered, already accessing the emergency protocols on her datapad. "The engines were supposed to be completely dormant." Supervisor Tamar appeared, flanked by 2 security officers Milo hadn't seen before. "Evacuate the hangar immediately," he ordered, his usual composure replaced by urgent authority. "This area is now under quarantine." "We need to contain the fire," Milo protested. "If it reaches the fuel cells—" "That is no longer your concern," Tamar cut him off. "Leave. Now." But Milo could see the panic behind the supervisor's controlled exterior. Whatever was happening wasn't part of any plan, and the consequences of a catastrophic engine failure in their outdated facility would be devastating, not just for them, but for the entire outpost. "Vex, Piper, with me," he decided, ignoring Tamar's orders. "Doc, see if you can override the emergency lockdowns from the control room." Before Tamar could stop them, they were moving, Milo leading his team toward the maintenance access tunnels that ran alongside the hangar. "This is insubordination!" Tamar shouted after them. "Your contract is terminated." "Bill me," Milo called back, not slowing his pace. The access tunnels were cramped and poorly lit, but they provided a direct route to the ventilation system that serviced the hangar. If they could reach the environmental controls, they might be able to engage the fire suppression systems that Tamar had inexplicably failed to activate. He wanted it to burn, Piper realized as they crawled through the narrow passages. "But why?" "Sabotage," Vex suggested grimly. "Maybe our mysterious client isn't the only one with an interest in this ship." They reached a junction that opened into the hangar's upper level. Through the grating, they could see the ship below, flames now engulfing its rear section. The heat was intense even at this distance, the metal of the ventilation duct uncomfortably warm beneath their hands. "The fire suppression controls should be just ahead," Milo said, leading them further along the passage. They found the control panel, but it had been physically damaged, the interface smashed, wires torn out. Deliberate, Vex confirmed, examining the destruction. Someone really wants this ship destroyed. Milo thought quickly. There's an auxiliary control station near the coolant regulators. If we can reach it, we might be able to manually activate the emergency systems. The journey through the increasingly hot ventilation system was harrowing. Twice they had to backtrack when passages became too hot to traverse. Smoke began to fill the ducts, forcing them to cover their mouths and noses with improvised filters torn from their clothing. When they finally reached the auxiliary station, they found it intact but locked down. I need an access code, Milo realized, staring at the flashing security prompt. Piper pushed forward. Let me try something. She input a sequence of numbers, the encrypted registry code Milo had discovered days earlier. The screen flashed green. Access granted. How did you? You're not the only one who's been doing research, she replied, with a shadow of her usual grin. The auxiliary controls gave them limited access to the hangar's systems, but it was enough to activate the emergency coolant protocols. Massive vents opened in the ceiling, releasing a deluge of fire-suppressing foam onto the burning ship. It's working, Vex exclaimed, watching through a monitoring camera as the flames began to recede. But their relief was short-lived. A secondary alarm activated, this one with a different, more urgent tone. Reactor breach, Milo read from the flashing display. But that's not possible. T-class cruisers don't have... This isn't a standard T-class, Piper reminded him. Remember? The ship's hidden reactor was approaching critical levels, a catastrophic failure that would destroy not just the hangar, but likely the entire outpost. We need to get back to the ship, Milo decided. The cube, the one we found. I think it might be a key of sorts. A key to what? Vex demanded. To shutting down the reactor, hopefully. Their return journey through the ventilation system was even more perilous than before. Parts of the metal ducting had begun to warp from the heat, and the smoke was thicker now, making it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. When they finally emerged into the hangar, the scene was chaotic. The fire suppression foam had contained the visible flames, but the ship's warning systems were still blaring. Most of the personnel had evacuated, leaving the vast space eerily empty, except for the massive vessel at its center. The access panel is on the underside, Piper reminded them, already moving toward the scaffolding that would take them beneath the ship. They reached the hidden compartment, finding it undisturbed despite the chaos. The cube was still there, its carvings now glowing with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the ship's alarms. Milo took it, feeling its warmth against his palm. Now what? As if in response to his question, a voice spoke, not aloud, but directly into his mind. Authentication required, it said, the words forming in his consciousness with perfect clarity. State your purpose. Milo hesitated, then answered truthfully, to prevent destruction, to save lives. There was a moment of silence. Then, authentication accepted. Initiating emergency protocol. The cube grew hot in his hand, its surface shifting like liquid metal. A beam of light shot from it, connecting with a previously invisible panel on the ship's hull. The panel slid open, revealing an interface unlike anything Milo had seen before. It wants input, he realized, studying the alien controls. Try inserting the cube, Piper suggested. Milo placed the cube into a recess that seemed designed for it. The fit was perfect. Immediately, the ship's alarms ceased, replaced by a low, harmonious hum. Auxiliary intelligence activated, announced a new voice, this one audible to all of them. It emanated from the ship itself, feminine and surprisingly warm. Greetings, engineers. I am Sunfire. They exchanged stunned glances. The ship is alive, Piper whispered. Not alive, the voice corrected. Aware. Thank you for reactivating my systems. The sabotage nearly succeeded in destroying both me and this facility. Sabotage by whom? Milo asked. Imperial agents loyal to Emperor Darien, Sunfire replied. They discovered my location and sought to eliminate me before I could fulfill my purpose. Which is? Vex questioned, her posture defensive. To serve the true ruler of the Empire, not the usurper who currently occupies the throne. Before they could process this revelation, the hangar doors burst open. A squad of armed individuals entered, led by none other than Supervisor Tamar. But his demeanor had changed entirely. Gone was the cold bureaucrat, replaced by a commanding presence that radiated authority. "Step away from the ship," he ordered, though his weapon wasn't aimed at them. Milo realized that Tamar's guards weren't targeting his team, but rather another group that had entered from the opposite side of the hangar. Individuals in the unmistakable black uniforms of Imperial security. The Emperor's spies. Sunfire confirmed in their minds. They came to ensure my destruction. A firefight erupted, energy weapons discharging in brilliant flashes across the hangar. Milo and his crew took cover behind a stack of supply crates. "What the hell is going on?" Vex demanded. "Civil war, it seems," Doc replied, having appeared from a side entrance. "I've been monitoring communications. The Emperor's forces are fighting against rebels, claiming allegiance to Prince Alex, the Emperor's nephew, who many believe is the rightful heir. And we're caught in the middle," Milo concluded grimly. The battle was brief, but intense. Tamar's forces, though outnumbered, had the advantage of preparation and superior positions. Within minutes, the Imperial agents were either dead or subdued. Tamar approached Milo's group, holstering his weapon. "I apologize for the deception," he said, his accent noticeably different now. "And for the danger you've been placed in." "Who are you really?" Milo asked. "Commander Tamar Alexanos, Royal Guard to Prince Alexei." He bowed slightly. The restoration contract was genuine, though its purpose was somewhat misrepresented. "You wanted us to repair the Emperor's ship for the rebellion," Milo realized. "The Prince's ship," Tamar corrected. "Sunfire was built for Alexei before his uncle seized power. Its quantum signature is key to the royal bloodline. It cannot be commanded by a usurper, which is why Darien abandoned it after his coup. We needed it restored without drawing attention." "And now?" Doc inquired. "Now we have 18 hours before Imperial reinforcements arrive," Tamar explained. "We need to complete essential repairs to make Sunfire spaceworthy again." 18 hours isn't enough time," Vex protested. "It will have to be," Tamar replied grimly. "The fate of the Empire depends on it." Milo looked at his crew, friends who had become family in this remote outpost, and saw the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. "Tell us what needs to be done," he said. The next 18 hours were a blur of frantic activity. With Sunfire's AI now active and assisting, they focused on the most critical systems: the damaged cooling apparatus, the sabotaged navigation controls, and the unstable reactor core. Vex worked tirelessly on the structural repairs, her strength and expertise proving invaluable in replacing damaged hull sections that protected vital components. Doc's diagnostic skills were pushed to their limits as she interfaced with Sunfire's ancient but sophisticated systems, identifying vulnerabilities and implementing workarounds for systems too damaged to fully repair. Piper, nimble and quick-thinking, tackled the intricate work of reconnecting the thousands of neural pathways that allowed Sunfire's AI to control the ship's functions. And Milo coordinated it all, drawing on decades of experience to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Tamar and his remaining forces secured the perimeter, preparing for the inevitable Imperial assault. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had one advantage: Sunfire herself. As the deadline approached, they gathered in what had once been the ship's bridge, now partially restored to functionality. "We've done all we can," Milo reported, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "The reactor is stable, the navigation systems are online, and the quantum drives are operational, but the gravitational array is still offline. which means you won't be able to break orbit without being detected. There is a solution, Sunfire's voice suggested. The station's gravity stabilizers could be modified to create a localized gravitational wave, enough to mask our departure signature. But that would mean someone staying behind to activate it manually, Doc pointed out. The controls aren't designed for remote operation. A heavy silence fell over the group. I'll do it, Milo said finally. The rest of you can escape on the maintenance shuttle. Protests erupted immediately, most vehemently from his crew. We're not leaving you behind, Vex insisted. You don't have a choice, Milo countered. Someone has to stay, and I'm the station chief. It's my responsibility. There's more to it than that, Tamar interjected. The person who activates the gravity stabilizers will be at the epicenter of a level 9 gravitational distortion. The survival probability is minimal. All the more reason it should be me, Milo maintained. In the end, they couldn't dissuade him. As Imperial ships appeared on the long-range sensors, final preparations were made for Sunfire's departure. Milo embraced each member of his crew one last time. This isn't goodbye, Piper insisted, tears streaming down her face. We'll find a way to come back for you. Milo smiled sadly. Just promise me you'll make it count. Whatever comes next, make it worth it. He watched from the control room as Sunfire's engines glowed to life, the massive ship rising gracefully from its moorings despite its still damaged state. When it reached the upper atmosphere, he activated the gravity stabilizers, rerouting power from every system in the station to create the massive distortion field that would mask the ship's quantum signature. The effect was immediate and violent. The station groaned around him, metal twisting as artificial gravity warped and fluctuated. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The viewport cracked, then shattered. Emergency force fields barely containing the explosive decompression. Through it all, Milo kept his hands steady on the controls, maintaining the field until Sunfire safely cleared the planet's defense grid. His last conscious thought, as darkness closed in, was a quiet satisfaction. For a simple mechanic from a forgotten outpost, he'd played his part in history remarkably well. Aboard Sunfire, Prince Alex stood on the bridge, watching as the Imperial blockade fell into confusion, their sensors blinded by the gravitational anomaly emanating from Outpost Epsilon. The stabilizers won't hold much longer, Tamar reported. We need to jump now. Alexei nodded, his young face solemn beneath the weight of his responsibility. Activate the succession protocol. Throughout the Empire, on thousands of worlds and stations, displays flickered. Communication systems overrode standard broadcasts. Authentication codes, older than the Empire itself, verified and confirmed a single message. The true heir returns. The usurper's reign ends. Justice will be restored. The quantum drives engaged, and Sunfire vanished into subspace, leaving behind an empire on the verge of transformation. 3 months later, in a small but well-equipped medical facility on Nexus Prime, Milo opened his eyes. He's awake, Piper's voice, somewhere nearby. Faces swam into focus, Vex, Doc, Piper, all looking down at him with expressions of relief and joy. How? His voice was raspy from disuse. Gravity cocoon, Doc explained. A little invention of mine I installed in the control room years ago, just in case. It created a pocket of stable space-time around you when the station collapsed. The station's gone? Completely, Vex confirmed. But a certain royal benefactor provided us with something better. Through the window, Milo could see a state-of-the-art repair facility, gleaming tools, advanced diagnostic equipment, and a hangar large enough to accommodate multiple capital ships. Emperor Alexei sends his regards, said a familiar voice. Tamar stood in the doorway, now dressed in the formal attire of the royal steward. And his gratitude. The succession protocol was successful. Darien has been removed from power, and the Empire is beginning to heal under Alexei's leadership. And you three? Milo asked his crew. What happens now? "We run this place," Piper announced proudly. "Official Imperial Restoration Facility Milo's Hope, specializing in historic and royal vessels." Milo laughed, then winced as his still-healing ribs protested. "Bit grandiose, don't you think?" "Actually," Doc said with a rare smile, "I think it suits us perfectly." Outside, the first rays of the system's twin suns crested the horizon, illuminating the Imperial insignia newly emblazoned on their facility. Not the harsh, angular emblem of Darian's regime, but an older, more elegant design. A phoenix rising from flames, wrapped protectively around a small mechanical gear. A fitting symbol, Milo thought, for a new era built by both royalty and mechanics.